Today we are talking all about thought loops or ruminations. So what exactly is a thought loop? So my friend Evelyn, who is from Awesome Training, is really bringing awareness to, well, what's a human thing and what's something that's specifically autistic? When it comes to thought loops and rumination, yes, that is a human condition. That is something all people do. However, thought loops and ruminations and worry play a different part in the autistic life. And we're going to talk about that because we're autistic. So we're going to talk about things from our autistic perspective. One of the things that we're going to talk about is, what is it exactly? So Mandel and Research Associates defines rumination as this: the tendency to engage in sustained repetitive thinking about negative topics. Overall, with variations from other people, there's also it's a pattern of thinking, which is most often, but not always, linked to a negative feeling, experience from the past or future feelings that are anticipated. So I know for myself, and I know for many other autistic people that I've talked to when we've discussed this topic in the past, is that we can get stuck on a thought loop that's not always a negative one. It could be completely benign. It doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation. It's just that we're consistently thinking about it. So when we're talking about thought loops and ruminations, for example, there can be times where we're replaying a conversation that has happened in the past. Hey, Paul. Hey, Emily. So when we're talking about a conversation that we're replaying in the past, that's something that everyone does just as a human condition, but it's something that we as autistics do in a different way. And we're going to get into that. The second part, sort of as an example of rumination and thought loops, is scripting every possible scenario for a future conversation. So how many of you guys do that? How many of you guys, you're going to have a conversation, or you're going to meet with somebody and you are playing through all the things that you're going to say in your head? I know I do this. It's a tool. So when we're talking about worry, the term worry, we're talking about thinking about future events. And when we're talking about rumination, when we're replaying events, that's things from the past that have happened. So let's talk about how these things can be both a tool and be very beneficial for us as autistics, because we use this as a tool, but we can also kind of get derailed and we move into that harmful behavior part of how those repetitive thoughts can impact us in a negative way. So let's talk about how is it that this behavior of repetitive thinking, how can it be harmful for us? It can cause us to lose sleep, which as autistics is already a struggle, right? It leads us to be more easily agitated because we're already sort of in this heightened state. It can increase your already underlying anxiety or depression. It can impact your emotions, and it can also, in the long term, start to change how you see the world and how you experience a feeling of safety in the world. It can be negative in that way. Some other harmful things, and just something to know, is that the human brain cannot distinguish easily between what is actually happening and what we're telling it is happening, like our thoughts. So that was a really big piece of awareness for me and knowledge from the neuroscience research, psychology research standpoint of what parts of the brain are engaging, because there are specific parts in research that will light up. And they've showed, okay, when someone is thinking or ruminating about things that have happened in the past, these parts of the brain light up. And when someone is actually experiencing something that's happening, these parts of the brain light up. Well, here's what's interesting. The brain doesn't distinguish between what's actually happening and what you are telling it is happening. Big one, right? Because that then leads us to the next part of that thought. And it's, well, if my brain can't distinguish between what is actually happening and what I'm telling it is happening, why don't I take the control to tell my brain what's happening that is going to serve me in a very healthy way? Now, there's a lot that goes into that, and we can get into that in more direct training later. But just the realization and the awareness of this is a really big part. Okay, so let's talk about how thought loops and rumination and worry can actually be a tool for us as autistics. So if we're using it as a tool and we are managing it as a tool, it helps us process and understand past events. As autistics, we take in all of the sensory input in social situations in particular all at one time. And it's really hard to distinguish between what someone's words are at the moment versus the tone of their voice versus their body language. We don't differentiate or pick one easily. We're taking it all in, and then we're trying to filter it out and figure out in the moment, which is another hard layer to it for us sometimes, on how to respond and what someone actually means. So if you're talking about taking things in and using it as a tool, we go back and reflect on conversations that we've had. And using it as a tool allows us to specifically think about the words that someone said, to specifically think about their body language, and to specifically think about the tone or inflection in someone's voice. It helps us process the conversation. It also allows us to dissect and pick up certain parts of it that we may have missed in the moment. So for us, thought, ruminating kind of thing, reflecting, and I don't want to say ruminating because that falls into more the repetitive behavior, but reflecting and thinking through things in this way is a very healthy tool that we can use. The other thing is it helps us plan and gain insight for future events. So if you fall into the harmful aspect of it, you are worrying and you are thinking about a conversation that you're going to have with someone next week. And I know for me, I have alexithymia, so sometimes identifying how I feel about something in the moment is really difficult and being able to put it into words. But I can, and I often do, think about how I'm going to respond, or I try to imagine how I'm going to feel in a conversation. Like if I know I'm going to talk to somebody about, maybe something uncomfortable next week that I don't necessarily want to talk about, but it's something we need to have a conversation about. I maybe can't find all the words in the moment. So I know that I want to think about what that person could potentially say and how I might feel or respond to that. And I'll give myself a couple of scenarios. So in that aspect, when we are using this tool to help us go over things that have happened in conversations in the past, and then we move on to the next step, and we are also sort of looking at all the different aspects of how a conversation could go and how we might feel in the future conversation, that's a tool, and that is helpful. Where this becomes unhelpful and harmful is when it's a repetitive behavior, when it's something we can't stop thinking about. We're not just using it as a tool to help us go back and look at the conversation for all those parts and pieces to make sure that we understood it, so that maybe if we had to come back and address something we wanted to talk about further, we can. We get stuck replaying all the shoulda, woulda, couldas and beating ourselves up because we didn't maybe say it right, or we didn't respond appropriately based on how somebody responded to us, and we go down the rabbit hole. That's what I'm talking about. We're up, we're laying awake at night, we're losing sleep. It is making us sick in our stomach. We're physically starting to feel the effects of the rumination or the worry of something. So here are some tips to help you. Well, there's 4 I've got today. So number 1, write it down. There's amazing research, and neuroscience research shows that writing engages the logical side of your brain. And I am a huge proponent of journaling and writing things down. It gets you out of that imaginative side of your brain and helps you get things on paper. So whatever your thought loop is that you've got going, write it down. Take the time to write it out. It allows you to sort of disconnect and step back in that third-party position to then reread what you've written and then ask yourself questions. Is this true? Is this factual? How did this occur? How did this truly happen? You know, what is the reality of it versus what am I just telling myself because I went down the rabbit hole? This really is a very useful tool. The second one, this was a really good one, and this is a really good way to allow yourself to have some time. Set aside a time each day to feel your feelings. And I know that sounds totally woo-woo, but let me get into, there's some science on this one. If I know that I have a specific time of day that I set up for journaling, for reflecting, and for me, it's in the mornings before I start my day. I exercise, I get all those feel-good endorphins up. It allows my heightened cortisol levels, because as humans, we wake up in the morning, our cortisol levels, our stress hormones are higher than any other time of the day. So exercising first thing in the morning brings those stress hormones down, which feed into our negative bias. And it allows those feel-good endorphins to come out. And after that, I sit down and I have my journaling time where I really reflect. So to be able to take some time, specific time that you set aside in the day for you to journal and just sort of feel your feelings, write them down, it is a wonderful sense of control for us, because we know that during this time of the day, I am allowing myself to do this, giving myself permission to do this. Here's the next step of this one. So if you have that time set aside to have those reflective times and to be more objective, yes, Jack, to be more objective, then the rest of the day, set up a backup plan for yourself. Set up a proactive tool to help you. So for the rest of the day, you want to engage in a stop tool. So if that's just visually in your mind when you catch yourself going down the rumination or the worry loop, envision a stop sign. Or throw in the brakes on in the car. Find something that is a visual trigger for you, that when you catch yourself, you stop. See the stop sign. Imagine yourself pushing your foot on the brake. Sometimes that physical, mental engagement there and using the imagination helps. Or come up with a phrase to stop the thought. Like, don't go down the rabbit, not going down the rabbit hole. Not don't, but not going down the rabbit hole. Not now. I've got specific time for that. So just sometimes even just that internal monologue prompt for yourself is really helpful. So here's the third one. Reframe the way you think. Reframe the statement and what you are thinking to yourself. Our self-talk is one of the biggest things that affects the way we feel and the way we think. And the way we think is how we act, how we behave. So this is a really big one. So instead of saying, I made a mistake because I'm stupid, reframe it and you instead, and catch yourself, throw up that stop sign and go, whoa, you know what? I'm not stupid. I know I'm not stupid. Or I might be feeling stupid at the moment, but that's not necessarily the truth of it. So reframe it and say instead, I made a mistake because I overlooked something. And in the future, I'm going to be more careful to pay attention to this area. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do something different. So the fourth one, and this is the second component that we're going to be moving into this week, is gratitude. Choosing to focus on what went well. So instead of reflecting on something that was an event that was really stressful or upsetting, there's always something that can be learned. So instead of, I made a mistake and I didn't pick up the things at the grocery store, I overlooked it on my list. Instead, and say, oh, I'm so stupid, I never pay attention. Well, you reframe it, well, I did miss this on the list at the grocery store. And next time I'm at the store, I'm going to take a minute to double check myself. Go through the list a second time or third time before I get in the checkout line so that I'm not stressed about missing something and I'm being proactive because I'm finding the opportunity on how to improve what I do every day. The more you seek the good, the more your brain begins to see it. Our brains are wonderful. They're malleable. There's something called neuroplasticity. And one of the things that happens inside the brain and what you can see are these Basically, think about it as a freeway, or think about an ant mound. And when you pour water over that ant mound, the water runs down those little channels and it makes a groove as you pour it over the dirt. The more water you keep pouring, the deeper, because the water's going to flow where those channels formed the first time. And it keeps going and they get deeper and deeper. The more water you pour, the deeper those ruts get. Your brain is the same way when it comes to thoughts. The more you think something, the stronger that neural path, that neural connection gets from one neuron to another. They get stronger, they get deeper, they get more ingrained. So the thoughts that you give more energy to and you repeat most often are going to be like an 8-lane freeway. Those thoughts that you don't focus on and that you are not focusing your attention and your energy on are going to be more like a light little trail that you see in the grass that a dog ran through. It's not going to be deep. It's not going to be rutted. You know, the grass is still there. It's just matted down and it's not used. It's like a single lane highway. When you open yourself up to starting to see good and look for the good things, look for the opportunities in every situation, it's going to get stronger. It's uncomfortable at first. I'm not going to lie. It's uncomfortable and it's not easy. Sometimes I might just find the good in the fact that I didn't choke somebody that day. That was the positive. That was the win. But the more I start to focus on, you know what? I didn't choke that person today, but what I did is I saw that they were just trying to communicate with me. They weren't being negative. They weren't being mean. They weren't being hateful towards me. They were just having a bad day. And that was the opportunity for me to maybe step back and show a little compassion. There are some amazing times and there are some amazing journaling opportunities that will help you really move into looking and seeing the opportunities in situations, knowing that we use thought loops as a tool for us and that it's not a negative. Oh, hey, did this flip the script for you? Do you now look at when you replay a conversation that's happened in the past or how you plan for a conversation in the future, that it's a tool and that there's a difference between how it can be helpful and how getting stuck in it and replaying it to the point that you start to lose sleep or become more anxious is where it moves into the harmful section, but that there's a way to do this in a really healthy way. Did that help you guys? Was that really beneficial for you? Let me know.